and welcome to another exciting program. Well, we've got a lot on tonight. In fact, we were saying before the program that we got so much we could probably do about 6 months worth of programs. Now, Caroline and I are looking into eugenics. And it's a bit like going down a rabbit hole and finding loads and loads of tunnels leading off in different directions that are all leading to the same place. And the more we discover, the more we're, for myself, I think Caroline's saying, the more we're shocked at what we're finding out. And it's all beginning to kind of join the dots, so to speak. Now, a couple of programs ago, I think it's a solo one that I did, I spoke about psychopaths. And it is my personal belief that psychopaths are a different species to human beings. And it doesn't matter, I'm not talking about religion, race, or anything like that. They come in all races and all religions. But if you look at the book, for instance, Political Ponerology, it states in there that they know how to recognize each other. And I believe they're a kind of antichrists, and they're here on earth to destroy us. And I've been looking into the public school system. Now, if you're American, you'll think public school, let's call it elitist school. This is what we have in Britain, an elitist school. And I know that public school means something different in America. So I've just explained that. And I'm not saying they're all the same, but a lot of them are training people into absolute ruthlessness, I believe, and kind of sociopaths. Now, first of all, before we start the program, there was a little bit of competition. And this is on the theme of what this program is about. And last week I said, what has Matt Hancock, the flat earth people, the moon landings, and Kinsey, what have they got in common? Now, what do you think it is, Caroline?
Are you going to explain who Kinsey is, please?
Kinsey, as I call him, he died in 1956, and he did a survey in America, and he had a I don't know what you would call it, a department or a university set up that looked at sex, and he had a very repressive childhood, and he then studied biology and that type of thing and became a kind of renowned expert in the field of biology and went to university and that. But behind that, he was a sex maniac, putting it bluntly, and he should have actually been in a psychiatric ward. And he did this survey in the 1940s and 50s, which made it look as if most of America was into bestiality. And you looking at it today, what it was, he was putting his own leanings to this survey. And the answer to the question, which I'm leading to, was Matt Hancock's statistics and this shall we say, FLU virus. And was it the flat earth and the supposed moon landings and Kinsey? What have they all got in common? They don't stand up to proper scientific scrutiny. That's the answer. They don't. Flat earth doesn't. The moon landings don't. I don't believe they landed on the moon. Do you, Caroline, think they landed on the moon? I don't.
Well, I have got to admit, I mean, I believed the TV for years and years, and it was only in the, last year or so that people were pointing out to me that they were fake. So what can you say? I mean, we all fall foul. You know, the indoctrination of the box in the corner. Would you believe that they would lie about moon landings? But anyway, enough of us falling foul of the truth, because we're heading for the truth. We've got a lot to cover tonight. Whether we cover it all. Well, yeah, I've been to talk, and we've been doing our own research. We've been doing it pretty much totally separately. So I've been looking at a thesis about the Salvation Army, and it seems to be that again, how many of us have helped the Salvation Army? I know the Salvation Army in my town, up until a lockdown, they were feeding the homeless and the dispossessed a couple of mornings a week. And who would have known that the bad guys, if you like, have been using all these churches for their own ends? And we're talking about eugenics. And what do we mean by eugenics, Chris?
Well, that is cutting the population. And this is now on my side. What I've been looking into is, of course, who I've just said, Kenneth Kinsey, as I call him. And also, I've been looking into, go on, that's it, this chap called Kellogg's. He was a eugenicist. And, of course, we all know about this chap, who I won't mention. I think we all know who he is. Kill Bill. And look at this very strange badge they're all wearing.
That's the sustainability. Is that the UN 17 goals? After people have watched this show, it might put them off their breakfast cereal from now on, especially if they know who's been behind it. Now, my Salvation Army story goes. Well, I was going to say. On a timeline basis, the Salvation Army, I'm going to look at this thesis, which said in the late 19th and early 20th century, the Salvation Army possessed such a high profile that it actually suffered satire, scorn, and physical attack. But in spite of this opposition, the organization experienced phenomenal growth. The organization started as a solitary missionary effort of William and Catherine Booth in East London in 1865, but by 1880 it had grown to include over 172 mission stations and 363 workers known as officers. By the end of December 1886, there were 743 corps and nearly 2,000 officers outside of Britain. And it says it was a social experience that was garnered through welfare schemes, led to the organisation being called upon for expert testimony in several national investigations. So it goes on. The Global Army, widely known reputation, and the extensive historiography that is dedicated to the organisation removes this discourse of eugenics from charges of localism or insignificance. It will be shown that far from being limited to parochial concerns or peripheral figures, the eugenics discourse was found at the very highest levels of this famous organization. William Booth wrote a book in 1890. It was called In Darkest England and the Way Out. And it will be demonstrated that the eugenic significance of the text has actually been overlooked. Although the title of this work appears to refer only to problems at home, its application in Britain and the United States makes the significance of these eugenic claims even greater. So we're talking about people, the dispossessed, and in actual fact, they made really quite shocking comments. They came to the attention of the eugenics people, and I think Booth said he knew that there were so many people. He imagined there was 3 million people at the time, or 1/10 of the population, that were in need of rescue. But his opinion basically was, we can't rescue everybody. So I think instead of trying to organize society in a way that people could all have meaningful jobs, there seemed to be years gone by where the general consensus amongst these eugenics people is that this 10% would be good at burying the 10%. And that might be shocking, because that really shocked me to learn that these so-called philanthropists thought
Can
that
you run that through again? Sorry, Caroline. Can you just run that through again? The 10%.
the 10% bottom of society, they would call them, I guess, feeders, you know, the broken people, I think they would call them. There's 10%. The only thing that they were good for was to bury their fellow men and women, to actually bury them. And that is what came through. That's what we're talking about. Eugenics. This has been happening for so many years. So when we're talking about plandemics and treating us like cattle, this has actually been happening for hundreds of years. And that's why the reason why we have gone to war. What do you think to that, Chris?
Well, that is fascinating. Now, I'm not putting 2 and 2 together and making 100, but do you remember what I was talking about the other week about Dr. Bernardo? In fact, he wasn't a doctor. He trained as a doctor, but didn't qualify. So Dr. Bernardo, and you said, was it the Salvation Army was set up, was it 1864, was it 1860, around about that time, 1860s, shall we say. Now, Dr. Bernardo, he kidnapped children off the street and they had their parents, and he sent them to Canada and Australia. How did he send them to Canada and Australia? Because I know that again, I don't know for sure, and I'm going to have research into this. You can't just, you need money to send people overseas, and the amount of children he kidnapped, it must have been an organisation that he may have used. And I know that the Salvation Army in the 1930s had a relocation plan where they relocated people from very poor areas to places like Canada, where they were richer. And I know that I think it was the Gorbals of Scotland, they did that a lot. And I have to say that it was a good scheme because it took people out of poverty to the relative riches of Canada, which was a very rich country. I'm not blaming the Salvation Army. I'm not putting any shadow over them, but there must have been some organisation or some way that Dr. Bernardo got those children to Canada and Australia. How? I mean, if you'd have paid the passage, I mean, he had some money, but you would have to have a lot of money to do that, and he would need some form of operation to do it. I mean, you've got to have some technique. So I'm going to look into how he did it, and also look at the plans that the Salvation Army had when they first started in the 1860s, 70s, 80s, and whatever. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Again, I can't blame because I don't know.
No,
but
well, I mean, all I know,
they're making 100.
Well, all I know is that when somebody paid for my flight to go to Perth just over a year ago now, they wanted me to go around and look at all the churches and the symbology. And I was in the Perth's main cathedral, November 2019, and all the pictures are of basically Freemasons. Freemasons must have left the UK, and they were like planted in other parts of the Commonwealth. So whether that's linking in there as well, whether that has links to churches, who knows? But what it does say, it says, what is it? However, Booth's comments, he'd made some comments about genocide. The turn of the century eugenics actually had a much more benign face than the late 20th century allows, because eugenics came to be seen as harboring the germs of genocide and totalitarianism. However, Booth's comments demonstrate that the most gruesome implications of eugenics had been perceived much earlier than the Nazi Holocaust. This recognition makes the fact that the Salvation Army became involved with eugenics organizations as discussed below. Booth's awareness of the lethal chamber ideology and his decision to reject it is made even more interesting by the fact that one of his critics accused him of endorsing these very same ideas. The high profile of Booth's scheme has resulted in an extensive review. Basically, he had criticism by Thomas Huxley, but what else? That Darkest England seems to have been a very, very interesting book. So maybe we don't want to malign Booth in any way. However, these victims, we were living in a capitalist society then, and people dare I say it, and this makes me sound like as if I'm a socialist. I'm not that either. Everybody has a place. If God brought you into the world, there was a reason for God to bring you into the world. And it's not for these psychopathic individuals to pick and choose who they want to live and who they want to die. That's what I think.
Yes, I agree with you. I 100% agree with you there, because I think that, again, it's this elitism, and it seems to be, again, leading back to the psychopathic attitude. I mean, it seems to run in families. For example, allegedly, I've got to say, because the person I'm going to talk about is still alive, so I've got to be careful. One of them is, did you know that the person that assassinated Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth, was the great-great-great-grandfather of Tony Blair's wife?
Oh, right. Well, and yes, he was allowed Cherry Booth, yes. I mean,
yeah,
Cherry Booth.
Because Cherry Booth, yes. Now, several grandparents back, but they say that he got killed. He was surrounded in a barn, and they went and shot him. Not quite right. That's very, very shady what happened, because his dental records turned up in, I think it was the Windy City. People tell me that it's the Windy City, Chicago. Turned up in Chicago in 1910. So he was still alive in 1910, John Wilkes Booth. And he was paid, allegedly, so we're told, by these very nice banking families, the Rothschilds.
Really?
Which leads me on to the chappie. Okay, Caroline, because
I came out with some after the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II, the world thought it was done with eugenics. So there obviously some people were linking the World War I and II with eugenics. So it says that is ethnic cleansing and depopulation. Today, the shock of ages is that not only is eugenics still asserting itself, but that is becoming the major narrative of the pandemic. And who said this, right? I just wonder what it would be like to be reincarnated in an animal whose species had been so reduced in numbers that it was in danger of extinction. What would be its feelings towards the human species whose population explosion had denied it somewhere to exist? I must confess that I am tempted to ask for reincarnation as a particularly deadly virus. Who said that?
Would that be how His Royal Highness Prince Philip?
Prince Philip said that in his foreword to If I Were an Animal, United Kingdom, Robin Clark Limited, in 1986. So that beloved chappie in hospital said he wanted to come back as a particularly deadly virus. Now, who said this? The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. If we do a really great job on vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 to 15%. Who said that?
Could it be the father of someone that's got a very strange blonde haircut?
No, it's not him.
No, it's not him. Oh, I don't know then. You lost me there.
The
Is it
world
his son?
today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. If we do a really great job on vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 to 15%. And who was
hang
that
on.
person?
Was it this jolly nice chap,
It
William?
is that jolly nice chap.
Oh, how nice! And whose father was, guess what? A eugenicist.
Absolutely. I'm glad you can say that word. Right, I've got another saying, right? So it's a Mr. Gates.
Yes.
Right, the next, who said this? Depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the third world because the US economy will require large and increasing amounts of minerals from abroad, especially from less developed countries. Who said that?
Well, it wouldn't be Stanley, was it? Stanley Johnson, I doubt.
Nope.
Must have been an American. Would it be?
It was.
Would it be Bill Gates again, or?
No, it would be a guy who I think he's still alive. He must be probably 90 now. He's very connected, shall we say, with men in the military.
Men in the military. Mm-hmm. Men in the military.
Is Henry Kissinger.
Oh, Mr. Sellers himself. Who, you know the film Dr. Strangelove? Whenever I see Peter Sellers in that wheelchair, I think of Henry Kissinger. He was the image of him years before Kissinger.
Really?
Right. Yeah. You look at Dr. Strangelove. You think that's Henry Kissinger. What he says is just like the thoughts of Henry Kissinger.
Now I've got one more statement made from somebody else. A total population of 250 to 300 million people, a 95% decline from present levels would be ideal. Who said that?
I think I'm going to have a third attempt. I think that is Stanley Johnson.
No, no, I've left him alone for a little while. Ted Turner. He's called Ted Turner. He's an American media proprietor, producer, and philanthropist. He's probably
philanthropist.
Yeah, a philanthropist.
Who was a philanthropist?
He was married to Jane Fonda.
Jane Fonda of Vietnam fame.
Yes,
who
as
went
a businessman.
to North Vietnam during the war. And why she was never charged with treason, I'll never know. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you there.
As a businessman, he is known as founder of the cable news network. This was after his dad had committed suicide. His dad had his own business, and then he took over it. So he was the first 24-hour cable news channel. In addition, he founded WTBS, which pioneered the superstation concept in cable television, which later became TBS. As a philanthropist, he is known for his $1 billion gift. Wait for this, to support the United Nations, which created the United Nations Foundation, a public charity to broaden US support for the United Nations. Turner serves as chairman of the United Nations Foundation Board of Directors. The most merciful thing. Oh, right, I've got another statement. So that's him. That's Ted Turner.
Yeah, Ted Turner.
He said a total population of 250 to 300 million people at 95% decline from present levels would be ideal.
Let's start with him. I think that's the best idea. Start with them. Let's start reducing the population with them. I mean, let's face it, if he was knocked off the face of the earth and this fella, I think we'd all, there he is, him. I think it'd be marvellous, wouldn't it? I think we should encourage them to top themselves.
And then we've got another statement. The most merciful thing, who said this? You've probably not heard of this one. I hadn't anyway, but the most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it.
I wouldn't know. I should think someone in a padded cell would probably say that.
A lady called Margaret Sanger, Woman and the New Race, Chapter 5, The Wickedness of Creating Large Families. She said that in 1920. The most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. Isn't that shocking? I think I might have another statement. I've got a final statement. Sorry, I keep saying I've got a final statement.
No, carry on.
Next statement. Who said this? That it is now far easier to manipulate with precision the human genome within viable embryos means that we are likely to see the advent of designer babies in the future who possess particular traits or who are resistant to a specific disease. Who said that and in what book?
It wouldn't be Charlie Boy, would it? It wouldn't be Prince Charles.
No.
Book. Someone that writes books. No,
designer babies. Who's wanting designer babies?
Designer babies. Who would want designer babies?
When you look at him, you'd think, well, yeah, absolutely.
Wouldn't be our friend William, would it?
It would be Klaus Schwab. It's in Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, a guide to building a better world. They're telling us, people.
I don't pronounce Schwab. Oh, him! Klaus Schwab, yes.
World Economic Forum.
The man that looks as if nature sort of, well, he was given, his mother gave birth to him and nature said, well, give him a second go. Klaus Schwab.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
A year ago, I'd never heard of him. Klaus Schwab, yeah, nasty piece of work. But the very strange thing, Carol, I've found with what I've been researching is there seems to be some strangeness with eugenics that revolves around the year 1914. Because that's when most of the big eugenicists and the eugenist organizations, especially in America, started to sort of, and also they started off in America, and then it sort of, in Britain, they became quite big. Now, this fella, Kellogg's, here he is. His name is John Harvey Kellogg, born in 1852. And when you eat your cornflakes, well, I don't eat cornflakes, but if you look at your cornflakes, you think, well, that seems rather harmless, don't they? Let's do a little resume of him, shall we? Now, he started what was called the Battle Creek Sanatorium, and his parents, they were of a kind of a religion that was, where are we? Congregationalist church of the Seventh-day Adventists church, and they were very pure, etc., etc. And he trained as a doctor and surgeon, and he started off the what was it called? The Battle Creek. It's not exactly this name. The Battle Creek Sanatorium, and I'll be very brief on this. It was a kind of posh health place where very rich people, the rich and famous, went to get well. And one of his clients was Rothschild. Isn't that strange? And he was into, I have to admit, he was a bit ahead of his time. The germ theory of disease, intestinal flora, health food, vegetarian diet, temperance, and believed in clean living, etc., etc., etc. And then he found the humble cornflake by mistake or by error, because something went wrong in something he was cooking, and he baked it too high, and he noticed people saying, oh, this is tasty, this is great, and his brother promoted the cornflake. So that's how it comes. But everything seems to be just fine, but there's something rather linking, I wouldn't say he knew Kinsey, because Kinsey came along a lot later, but there's something about these so-called surgeons. Now, I'm not saying all surgeons are psychos. No, they're not. But a large proportion of them are go in that area. Now, if you look at the book that Eustace Mullins wrote, and this was a long time ago, I think this was in about the 80s and 70s he wrote it. So the 1980s, He wrote it. You can actually see Eustace Mullins. Unfortunately, he passed away about 10 years ago. But he does an interview with Bobby something or other on American television. And it was a small television network in the southern states of America. And he wrote a book called Death by Injection. Murder by Injection. Terribly sorry, I got the title wrong. Now, you can download that free of charge on the internet and you can read it.
Can you?
Yes. And Murder by Injection is fascinating because he went into how we've gone away from natural medicine to pharmaceutical medicine and how the banksters and the bankster families were very much involved in it, such as the Rothschilds and the Vanderbilts and all those people. And he goes into far more detail. So at the end of this program, if people want to go on to YouTube and tap in Eustace Mullins and Murder by Injection, you'll see a program is about 20 minutes long. And what he says about how we've got to this stage in, I wouldn't call it medicine, but I'll call it toxins that keep you alive and are profit making. That's my personal view. He says it far better than I can. But it's strange that going back to this chap and another picture of him, this chap Kellogg, he was a surgeon and a bit of a pervy one at that. And in 1914, he set up the Race Betterments Society, which is basically eugenics. And he believed in mass sterilization. And they actually had an exhibition where Charles Davenport attended in 1914 and 1915. And remember, America was not involved in the First World War during those years. It was only later on in 1917, I believe. So it turned out that he believed in purity in race. And then we go on to this chap, Kinsey. Here he is. Now, he was brought up in poverty and he had a lot of deformities because of the poverty he went through as a child. But I think his family got lucky. He went to university and he studied biology. But there was something a bit kinky about his sex life. He was bisexual. His father virtually disowned him. He set up, how, I just do not know, and I'm trying to find out where he got the funding from, a kind of sex university type place. And he started doing these questionnaires in the 1940s and the 1950s. He died in 1956 at the age of 62. And he was basically a sex maniac, put it bluntly. And he actually came back from abroad and the customs noticed in his bags, he had loads and loads of film of pornography. And he died before they could take him to court. He died of a heart attack, apparently. But he used to photograph his, inverted commas, students having sex in the loft of his house. And this is on Wikipedia. You can read it there. And
you mean he was having people in the house and they were sleeping in his house and then he had a hole from the ceiling or something?
No, he had in the loft of his house, he had it as, I suppose, a studio, I'm guessing. And he would actually photograph for his studies, of course, his students having sex with each other. He was bisexual himself, and he had, even though he was married, he had flings with blokes and women and whatever. And what the point I'm getting at is that his findings, he made it look as if the majority of people in America are into bestiality. I won't go further than that. It's rather disgusting.
Right, okay, I think we'll pass on that one.
We'll pass on
right.
that.
Wow,
I won't say any more, but what he's trying to say, what's happening is people are still believing the results of what he found, even though scientifically it doesn't stand, it doesn't, I wouldn't say stand up, but it's absolutely disgusting what he's supposed to have said. But the man was mental, but the left wing and the, shall we say, these trendy lefties still believe in his findings, and that's why we're having all this kinky stuff today where they're teaching young children sexual things which they shouldn't do. They're teaching little tots of infants and that about sex. And it's all based on the findings of Kinsey, who, it wasn't scientific what he was doing. He was a damn sex maniac who should have been in a padded cell. But the people are still believing that and saying, oh, yes, a marvellous man and that. And I mean, I saw a BBC documentary about him. It made it look as if he was a marvellous person who's found out all this stuff. And it doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny, because you notice the man was cuckoo. And that's basically it.
It's terrible when you think about it, when you look at these people, excuse me, that have played an influential role in our society. And it seems to be that every single person that seems to get on in this particular, almost like a revolving door scenario, these elites, they all have big problems, haven't they? Of some description. I mean, satanic. I mean, how did they manage to take control of the world? I mean, I'm reading this article here now, and after those statements of these people who, from Klaus Schwab and Prince Philip and so on, this guy's writing, eugenics is a social and scientific movement based on the belief that the genetic quality of the human race can be improved by the use of selective breeding, as well as other often morally criticized means, to eliminate groups of people considered genetically inferior while encouraging the growth of groups judged to be genetically superior. And that is those that deny the mass eugenics efforts that exist in the US and globally today are either pathological liars, are censorship-driven manipulative propagandists, or completely ignorant of any reality whatsoever. The entire transhuman, technological, and technocracy movements that consume the ruling class today are highly based on eugenics. Openly sought and planned Great Reset being pursued by those claimed ruling elites that currently run this country and the world, thus desirous of the murderous and human-altering progressive agenda, are the epitome of the modern eugenics movement. This is what we're facing. And when we started on this eugenics journey, I never realized the scope, how insidious this cancer is in our society, even to the fact, and that's why we have now gone so far away from our creator. We have lost our, our morals, dare I say. You've got people who say we don't want GMO food. We don't want to eat GMO food, but we don't mind having a GMO baby because, that this making babies with no problems, like Klaus Schwab said, we can have children born now with eradicating specific diseases. However, I'd like to say to Klaus Schwab, a lot of these diseases have been brought about by people in the elites tinkering with our water supply, with our food. And, we've got the Codex Alimentarius, which has been in place since 2012. So the young people of today, at least most of us were born before 2012 and had a decent part of our life before 2012. But since 2012, these people now coming into the world and being subjected to the food that has no nutrients in it and has all these E numbers. I mean, what chance do these people have right fair? And aren't they going to put a bigger burden on a non-existent or soon-to-be non-existent NHS? I mean, it is truly shocking, isn't it?
It is shocking. And also, when you consider that a lot of these plastics that this food comes in, and I'm guilty of buying food, and probably you may be, that is actually wrapped in plastic, you can't avoid it. And apparently they found that the reason why the population in Europe and more, shall we say, developed countries is dropping like a stone, is there are chemicals in the plastic which sterilize people. And they've actually found this. Scientists have actually found this, but they've been kept quiet about it. So if you have, say, something innocent like a yogurt, you might be scraping the yogurt pot and eating it, especially if you're a man, and it sort of semi-sterilizes people. And this is why the birth count is dropping like one of the reasons why the birth count is dropping like a stone. But it's quite true what you were saying, Caroline, about this eugenics, because they criticize Mr. H, and I'm not praising or anything like that, because a lot of terrible things did happen in Germany during World War II. Because you notice whenever you put people into camps or you have to order them around to do things, in come the psychopaths like a sort of bees around a honey pot. But what a lot of what people don't realize, and I mentioned this the other week, is that Norway was occupied by Germany, and a lot of young, fit German soldiers, so they had lots of relationships with very pretty Norwegian ladies. And when the Germans retreated, there was a lot of unmarried mothers in Norway. And they had a eugenics policy there after the war, remember, after 1945, in which any mother that had had a child of German origin, the child was put in a mental institution. And the one of the members of ABBA, the lady, was it Frida?
Agnetha? Oh, Frida. Anna Frida.
Frida, I think it was. Her mother quickly went over the border to Sweden, where they didn't carry out this this policy, because otherwise we would never have had ABBA, and she'd have ended up, that very nice person, she would have ended up in a mental institution. That's something that's covered up. They did the same in America. They tried to sterilize the black population in the 1930s. They did experiments, as we covered the other week, with syphilis and things like that. They did some terrible things, but that's all covered up. And they also did some very bad experiments in the former Soviet Union as well. That's all covered up. We don't hear very much about that. And it's all to do with population, reducing the population. And whenever you look, it's all basically based upon a form of communism. And that is, communism is an elite few who rule the masses. And wherever you've got communism, you've got genocide. And what have we got today? Communitarianism, which is a new form of communism. And we've got genocide, but it's hidden. And have you noticed also that I think that these psychos have gone underground, where years ago they used to commit terrible atrocities, where they would be hung, drawing, quartering people and doing all terrible things in public. Since about the 18th century, they've kind of gone underground with it. And they're still as vile as they used to be. But shall we have a quick look in chat to see what our jolly nice people in chat are doing?
Okay.
Is there anything more, Caroline?
I'll have a look at. Well, I was going to say, have you heard of something called the Good Club? No. And, you know, we've heard about the Committee of 301 and all these other clubs, but I've never heard of the Good Club. And it's the most elite club in the world. Ordinary people need not apply. Indeed, there is no way to ask to join. You simply have to be very, very rich and very generous on a global scale. This is the Good Club, the name given to the tiny global elite of billionaire philanthropists who recently, and this is in 2009, and think back to the Rockefeller lockstep.
Rockefeller. Surprise.
Well, yeah. So they recently held their first and highly secretive meeting in the heart of New York City. This was in 2009. Now, I've not heard anybody mention about the Good Club or about this meeting in 2009. So we've got Bill Gates, George Soros, Warren Buffett, Oprah Winfrey, David Rockefeller, and that Ted Turner. Well, we know what his views are on the population. He wanted to downsize the population by 95%. It says there were other people too, like business giants Eli and Edith Broad, who are equally wealthy but less well known. All told, its members are worth $125 billion, and that was just in 2009. So the meeting was called by Gates, Buffett, and Rockefeller. It was held in response to the global economic downturn and the numerous health and environmental crises that were plaguing the globe in 2009. It was in some ways a summit to save the world. No wonder that when news of the secret meeting leaked via the seemingly unusual sources of an Irish-American website, it sent shockwaves through the worlds of philanthropy, development aid, and even diplomacy. It is really unprecedented. So you've basically, these are the people, they're not governments, they've not been voted by anybody. They have the unlimited wealth and they are taking decisions for the whole of the world. So it says it's unprecedented. It is the first time a group of donors of this level of wealth has met like that behind closed doors in what is in essence a billionaires club, said the senior writer at the Chronicle of Philanthropy magazine. The existence of the Good Club has struck many a two-edged sword. On the one hand, they represent a new golden age of philanthropy, harking back to the early 20th century, when the likes of Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, and Carnegie became famous for their good works. Yet the reach and power of the Good Club are truly new. Its members control vast wealth, and with that wealth comes huge power that could reshape nations according to their will. Few doubt the good intentions of Gates and Winfrey and their kind. Oh yeah, Oprah Winfrey. Winfrey looks so odd without Oprah in front of it. They have already improved the lives of millions of poor people across the developing world. But can the richest people on earth actually save the planet? The president's house of Rockefeller University is on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. The university's private campus, full of lush green trees, lies behind guarded entrances and a metal fence. It overlooks the East River. So it was here on the 5th of May 2009 that the Good Club gathered. The university's chancellor, Sir Paul Nurse, was out of town, but at the request of David, Rockefeller had allowed the club to meet at his plush official residence. So this is Rockefeller, and this was just before the lockstep. So did we know about this meeting? Ted Turner was at that meeting, and he wanted the population of the world to drop by 95%. Coincidence? I don't think so.
I don't think so. And have you noticed, I mentioned this on a previous program, that 2/3 approximately of MPs, those in government, are ex-public school or elite school, to be more precise for our American viewers. And this chappie, George Osborne, you can see him there. There was an exposure of what's the Bullingdon Club, and I believe that the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was a member of it.
So
and
was Cameron.
What they get.
What's his name? You mean this guy, the picture?
Yeah, here he is. Osborne, he was the ex-chancellor. Hang on a minute. Can you put that back again? Sorry, sorry, Caroline.
Right,
I had a picture of it.
Stuff in his face. Right.
Yes. Well. As his nose got a bit bigger. It seems to be growing longer, doesn't it? I don't know quite. Because his father said the working class can't spell Pinocchio. So that's very apt, isn't it? Because every time he tells a lie. But what they got up to, I'd done a recording, and there's technical problems. I couldn't play the recording back. But there was a madame that used to supply girls to the Bullingdon Club. and what she said, what they got up to, I wouldn't repeat. But she was interviewed, and I've got a recording of that interview. And believe me, it's not nice. It's very unpleasant. Shall we say it's similar to what Kinsey was into. I won't say any more than that. I think that's it. So, as I say, this, what we're looking into, I don't know, it's the same with you, I think. The more you look into it, the more you go, this is all adding up. It's all to do with
don't you think, though, that sorry to cut across you then, but just that good club, that was just before and no one's talked about that meeting ever, and it's linked to Oprah Winfrey. Now, remember, Oprah Winfrey has just interviewed Harry and Meghan.
Well,
and it's all part of the same club, isn't it?
Well, it is. It's this sort of elitist club. Again, it's always the elite that think they're genetically superior to anybody else. And the only industrialists there may be others, that went against this, now, if I'm wrong, please tell me, audience, was Henry Ford. Now, Henry Ford, he was very much against the people we're not allowed to criticise, the banking fraternity, shall we say, of the people we're not allowed to criticise, because I think they try to rip him off. But the strange thing with Henry Ford, he tried to prevent World War I happening. He actually went across to Germany and tried to force peace talks. He didn't want it to break out, but he was a Freemason. That's something I can't quite get my head around. Strange, isn't it? But as far as I can see, Henry Ford was a good man. Well, all right, it doesn't mean to say if you're a Freemason you're bad or good, but I can't understand. He seemed to be an individualist. He is a Freemason. Yet he was against the people we're not allowed to criticise, or shall we say the banking fraternity of the people we're not allowed to criticise. So that's quite there's an interest there. But I think what you brought up tonight about the Salvation Army, I'm going to try and find out how Bernardo got those children abroad, because there must have been a middleman somewhere or some organisation somewhere. And I'm not saying Salvation or anything like that. There must have been something somewhere that was like a machine that sent those children abroad, because it costs a lot of money. But let's have a quick look in chat, shall we?
Anything chat, yes, any chat.
Okay. I apologise. I say this every week. I can't read all of them out, but there's some brilliant ones here. Where are we? Hello, we got Urban Stealth Camper Van, mate. Hello. Nice to have you on board. By the way, Urban Stealth Camper Van, don't take the joke that I said in the last programme too seriously. Bit of a dirty gag it was. Right, anyway. Now, what we got here? I don't know which one to read out. Do you know something? I'm like a kid in a toy shop. I don't know which one to read out first. There's loads of them.
Really?
Somebody said about these. Look at some breeds of dog. It doesn't work. Well, guess right. Interbreeding doesn't work. Look at the Royals. I've told you before about that lunatic asylum in South London that my father used to deliver gummed paper to when he was a van boy in the 1930s. And if only I would have made a note of the name of it, but apparently it's where the Royals used to put all their, shall we say, offsprings, because they're close cousins marrying, that are a bit, and they used to stay there for life. And he used to go in there to the reception. They could hear all these screams and funny shouts and sort of walk out. And the locals knew that that's where the Royals actually had their offsprings taken to it. And it was known in those days, they believed that a royal gave birth to, shall we say, an offspring that wasn't quite normal, it would be swapped with another child. So that's quite interesting. And there's a rumour that the Queen's father wasn't George, it was Churchill. How we can prove it, I don't know, but the Queen's mother's doctor said she gave birth by some means or other. Make your own mind up with that, some means or other. Right, now what we got here?
Well, that's why the Queen's gynecologist signs like some official secrets act. Well, it's Jill Dando's husband to be. After Jill Dando was murdered,
Yeah.
He became the Queen's, the royal family's physician or something, didn't he? Yeah.
No, he was gynecologist.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, it was.
Jill Dando, I think she knew too much. And she was about to spill the beans on the paedophilia, didn't she? She was about to. And when she was shot, because the chap that got, he was a fall guy. They reckoned that the person that they put to convicted couldn't have done it. It was a professional hitman that did it, because it was so professional the way he did it. And there are professional hitmen in the world. If you pay them enough, they'll bump someone off for you. And that's well known amongst the amongst the dodgy circles. I mean, remember the Jeremy Thorpe case? He paid someone to bump off somebody, and it all went wrong, and he got away with it because he was, shall we say, he had the right handshakes. But it was, I better remind the listeners or viewers of that. Jeremy Thorpe, he had an affair with a bloke in the early 60s, and in the 1970s, this bloke started to blab, and it was making it very uncomfortable for Jeremy Thorpe. It's dead now, Jeremy Thorpe. So he paid a hitman to go and bump him off, and the hitman was so incompetent, he went to the wrong place, and then he accidentally shot the poor sod's dog. Shouldn't really laugh.
It's not funny. It's really not funny.
And eventually it went to court, and Jeremy Thorpe got away with it. I think it's around about 1979, late 70s anyway. And you think if you or I paid a hitman to go and bump someone off, we'd get life imprisonment, but he got away with it. And that's it. And there was a fantastic, on Private Eye, there was a fantastic picture after the case. Okay. And there's a picture of Jeremy Thorpe with his wife. And there's a speech bubble coming out of his wife's mouth saying, "Jeremy, what are you going to do now the court case is over?" And he says, "Same as usual, dear, bugger all." Double meaning. Right, now let's have a look. We got here Paul. Hello, Paul. Whelks found in the River Forth were discovered to be turning hermaphrodite. The SEPA report identified the chemical used to paint the hulls of boats to prevent barnacles forming to be responsible. Similar happened to near where I live in the River Stort. There was a pharmaceutical company that begins with G and ends with O in Hertfordshire. Yeah, it was Glaxo actually. I can say this because it was in the news. They years ago used to pump chemicals into the River Stort, and the barbels, which was the fish there, the fishermen noticed they were changing sex because all hormones and that were pumping into the river. But they cleaned their act up today. So,
of course they have. Of course they have. Yes, yes.
Yes, of course they have. I don't really want to end up in court. Yeah, they have actually. Right. Cumin. Then we've got Cider Guy. Hello, we're going to natural health here. Phil Howard, indeed, since I started taking 10,000 IU of vitamin D3, and I won't read out the rest of it, and zinc, I don't even get sniffles now. When do these disgusting companies ever tell us that we can boost our immune systems? Yeah, you've got to be a little bit careful with vitamin D3. I'm on 10,000 IU, and it's when the summer comes, leave it off a little bit because it's a bit too powerful. But it's okay during the winter, so I've heard. Okay, now let's go down a little bit more.
Have I come onto a doctor's program?
Sorry?
I've come onto a doctor's program now.
A doctor's program now. With Dr. Caroline Stephen and Dr. Chris. Yeah. Hang on.
I do a worse job sometimes. Norman Scott Chris, remember it well. Oh yeah, Norman Scott.
Norman Scott, that was it.
Who's Norman Scott Chris?
Sorry?
I was thinking, who's Norman Scott Chris?
Yeah, well.
I remember Norman Scott, yeah.
Apparently, he was in, what was it now? He was in Bedfordshire, and the assassin went to Barnstable. He was so incompetent. It was really quite a funny case. And it's a funny start.
Now, to be honest, I remember being on holiday in Germany and I'd set the sat nav and this place name, there was actually two of that same place name. They were about 100 miles apart and I did go to the wrong place. So it can be, but Barnstaple and Bedfordshire, no, what was the town in Bedfordshire called?
Biggleswade, that was it. Supposed to go to Biggleswade, they went to Barnstaple. Well, you know, it begins with, you know, right. Right, now let's, here we are. This is interesting. Emin, Bertrand Russell said that diet, injections and injunctions are good ways to control the population. Bertrand Russell wasn't a particularly nice piece of work, was he? I think it was in the impact of society, of science in society, but he wrote another similar book as well. Yes, Bertrand Russell, I think if I remember rightly, in his 90s, he was anti-war protester and all this, that and the other. And now it says here, another one from Emin, the government's regulations for the fourth industrial revolution page has a section on 3-parent baby therapy. Oh my God. Fathers,
oh, yes. Well, I've got something about the baby thing. Yeah, if you want to keep reading them out, I've got something about.
Okay. Someone's put here anal Schwab. Yes, very nice. Bond baddie. Oh yeah, the Bond baddie was Goldfinger, wasn't he? And there was actually an architect, if you look it up, who made that revolting-looking building in West London. Aldous Huxley. Yes, Brave New World. He said quite a lot. He predicted the future in the 1960s. You can actually see an interview that he did for television in 1959, 60. It's on YouTube. You can actually look it up. Now, someone's here. Emin says, I wonder if we should trust. Well, I'm biased. I'm totally against them. I think we've had all the problems since they've come on the scene. Cancers.
Well, I've got something about, we're talking about the 3-parent babies. Listen to this. Robert G. Edwards might not be a household name, but the innovation he pioneered along with Patrick Steptoe certainly is. And we're not talking about Steptoe and Son TV program now. We're talking about in vitro fertilization, IVF for short, the process where human eggs are fertilized outside of the body and the resulting embryos implanted in a woman's womb led to the 1978 birth of Louise Brown, the world's first test tube baby. To date, an estimated 5 million children worldwide have been born using this innovation. Edwards received the 2010 Nobel Prize in Physiology of Medicine for this remarkable achievement. Edwards was a member in good standing of the Eugenics Society in Britain for much of his career. What do you think to that? Eugenicists of that era. So this is, so that's in not so long ago, in my lifetime. Eugenicists of that era also believed that people with what they considered the least desirable traits tend to have the most children, precipitating what they saw as an inevitable decline in a society's intellectual and physical vigor. Taking their cue from livestock breeders, eugenicists argued that socially disadvantageous characteristics could be bred out of human populations through policies that limited the reproduction of the unfit, the feeble-minded, the poor and the weak. Social philosophy eugenics received approbation and financial support from the wealthy and other elites, followed by the likes of philanthropists John D. Rockefeller. Edwards himself hinted at the link between IVF and eugenics when reflecting on the 25th anniversary of Louise Brown's birth in 1993, saying that developing IVF was about more than infertility. I wanted to find out exactly who was in charge, whether it was God himself or whether it was scientists in the laboratory. And guess what Edward's conclusion was?
Go on.
He said it was us. There you go.
Well, someone here said Stanley Johnson is very concerned about soul population, but thinks human population should be dramatically down. And you very kindly sent a recording of Stanley Johnson, that's Boris Johnson's father, talking about bringing the population down to about 10 to 15 million in Great Britain. And but again, all ex-elitist schools. I say elitist, I don't say public, because again, the Americans will wonder what I'm talking about, but they're all from these elite schools. And what I was going to add is that I worked with a chappie who was an ex-public school, elitist school, shall we say. And I'm not saying they're all like this. But the one that he went to, he was dumped there at the age of 7 and didn't see his parents for years. He didn't even recognise his mother and father when they came back to see him. And he had a terrible time. Very nice, very pleasant character, but it had a happy ending to the story because he married a very nice lady who understood him, and they had a baby daughter. But he told me quite a bit about his life in public school, and what it boiled down to was he said it was sadism all the way through, and that was his particular one. I'm not saying they're all like that, just saying the particular one he went through, and it was survival of the fittest, and the bullies, the teachers helped the bullies. So the top ones were the bullies, the ones that went through public school. Oh, it's marvelous, and that they were the ones. But he said the kids who were a bit nervous, shy, anything like that, he said it was hell. And a lot of the teachers that taught, especially sports, some of them were a bit sadistic. Again, I'm not saying they're all like that. I'm just reporting on what this chap's told me. So
we've gone over the hour. Can I just finish with this comment?
Yeah.
This guy who had worked out the IVF, he said in 1999, soon it will be a sin of parents to have a child that carries the heavy burden of genetic disease. We are entering a world where we have to consider the quality of our children. And I'll leave it there.
Well, I think we've done thanks, Caroline. You've really done a lot of research, more than I have actually, and it's fantastic. Shall we give people?
I'm sure we could do another one. I'm sure we've got more stuff we could cover.
Oh, we've got lots more. I mean, I'd like to cover the United Nations and the organisation for the United Nations, which was the League of Nations, because again, there was the League of Nations and there's a United Nations that was set up after World War II, and it isn't such a nice peacekeeping organisation, because where do you think that Agenda 2030 comes from? United Nations. So I'd like to cover that. Is there? What do you have you got anything we can give?
Yeah, well, we'll chat about it off air, because I know that I've got to go. So thank you so much for having me on your show, Chris. I know we've gone over the hour, but not to worry. And let's do another show next week, if that's okay. 6 o'clock as usual. I lost a battery on Facebook, so only people have seen 3/4 or 2/3 of the show. So hopefully you can you can send me the link of the show and I'll get it out to everybody.
Smashing. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and thank you, Caroline, for coming along, which has given fantastic information. And I can't thank you enough. It really is.
No, thank you. You're so knowledgeable. If I had a brain the size of yours, I would be able to remember more. But there is so much, isn't there? There is so much to learn.
Well, likewise, you are very highly intelligent, and I'd say the same thing about yourself. And a brain the size of yours would be so much. But thank you so much for coming on, and I'd like to thank everybody. Please join me at 8 o'clock next Monday. And if you're a bit sensitive, you can put your fingers in your ears when I tell the dirty jokes. So there we go. And also, same place, 6 o'clock, and this is UK time, 6 o'clock next Wednesday for more information. And remember to please subscribe and ding that little bell, ding, 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 ding. And also you can follow Caroline. Now, I've got your, you've got your own website. You're on Facebook, and it's Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth. And I know you've been booted off of YouTube,
Yeah,
Because
my friend has got a YouTube channel. It's called Broadcasting the Truth. So you can find some of the videos there. Broadcasting the Truth, website carolinestevens.net. And thank you so much to everybody for watching and listening to us chatter on about what we consider to be really, really important background information for what is happening. Oh, don't forget Jack the Ripper. So maybe one of us has got to do Jack the Ripper.
yes, I've got to do Jack the Ripper and the Royal Connection. So haven't forgotten. It's just been a bit busy. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us, and
Bye
good
for now.
night.
Thank you. Good night.